I'll try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. I'm getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me up tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time. You feeling alright? I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. I think I'll do it on my way. I'm gonna show you what I'm going through, get you out of your comfort zone, 'cause I need more of the truth right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me up tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time. You feeling alright? I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around.
Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word live in the middle of the week. What's this about? What's happening? I hope you're all well. It's been a long time, or it feels like a long time since we've done a midweek stream. Jonty and I were chatting after the stream on Sunday. And thought we'd come and talk to you all about the 2022 car, or one iteration of the 2022 car. I'll get onto that in just a moment. Hope you're all well. It has been a while, hasn't it, these Wednesday streams? Good to see some midweek regulars in the chat. You're probably here every Sunday, but I just don't notice you. It's a little bit quieter on a Wednesday, which is always quite nice. So we're going to talk about the 2022 car. Then I'm going to come to you guys as well for your questions a little bit later in the stream. So if you've got a burning question, keep it under your hat for now, and then I'll let you know later when we're going to head into Q&A, and we'll try and do a good 20 minutes or so of just answering your questions. So nice and interactive tonight, nice and chilled. It's probably going to fall on deaf ears, but can we please try and keep the chat a little bit nicer than it was on Sunday? Good Lord, I'm still having nightmares. But anyway, let's get on to 2022 and say a very good evening to the one and only Jonty. Jonty, mate, is it 2018? Have I got the wrong calendar?
Oh, you're late, mate. Me and Phil Pot have already made this joke. Yeah, just like the old days.
Yeah, the gruesome twosome back together on a Wednesday. Oh, yes, 2022. Are you looking forward to it? Before we get onto the car, are you looking forward to next year? Or are you just totally pumped for the rest of this season first, and we'll worry about that later?
Well, definitely pumped for the rest of this season. Of course, it's a proper title fight. When did we last have one? What, 2016? Yeah, must be. But next year, shiny new car. I always get excited about big reg changes like this, even if they turn out to be rubbish.
It's just something else to get us excited, isn't it? And I think, 2016 for the last title fight, Ferrari, without sounding too condescending, they gave it their best shot, didn't they, in 17 and 18? It didn't really come to anything after the summer break, but I'd say since 2016, and that got a little bit spicy as well, didn't it? So I think it's all going to explode from here on in. But anyway, 2022. So we've got lots of regulation changes coming next year. If you've not heard about them, there are plenty of articles out there. We'll try and go through some of them today. We're not going to be doing a tech deep dive or anything crazy like that, because it's me, and I'd just be making a fool of myself. We just want to talk about really the aesthetics and what we're expecting next year. My first impression when I saw that car, Jonty, was very much the same as Carlos Sainz. From the front wheels back, it looks pretty mega. However, there's something bugging me about that front wing and nose, and it wasn't until Jack on Twitter shared a picture of Nigel Thornberry that I finally saw it, and Chase Carey as well. I'm not fond on the very front of it, but I think from the front wheels back, it looks pretty hot, to be fair.
Yeah, it does. And I think you're right about the front wing. A lot of people have been saying the same thing. Some of it might be those, nice, pretty-looking curvy side pods that we know for a fact the teams will not be having. When you look at the car from the front, they just look like eyes. Some people even said it looks a bit like Dr. Robotnik, which is a little bit alarming. But as someone in chat's pointing out, that it looks really high. It looks really far off the ground. So I don't think that can be the final iteration for the front wing at all.
No. I think that could be what it is. It just looks ridiculously high at the front. That's the striking thing, isn't it? But now you've said that about Dr. Robotnik. Thanks for that. I mean, that's it now. You've just ruined 22 for me. It looks like Dr. Robotnik, and it is Dr. Robotnik, by the way. I'm not having this. We'll have that debate another day. Yeah, there's just something about the front that I'm not keen on. I mean, we've got to say, I guess, a kind of disclaimer. A lot of people will know this already, but if you're new to F1, just to explain, that is one interpretation of the new regulations by Formula One and the FIA. What the teams come up with could be, I mean, it won't be completely different, but it is not going to look like that. I'm pretty confident that every single car is going to have several differences on it, not just from what we're looking at now, but also from each other. There's going to be so many different ways they could go next year. I mean, I keep going back to it. You look at 2014. I remember, I think it was Sky Sports F1, Ted Kravitz doing this kind of piece on how the regulations could make the cars look. And I think he said something along the lines of that in there of saying, I'll paraphrase. I can't be bothered to find a quote. I'll paraphrase. It was something along the lines of, this is one interpretation, but there are uglier ways or less attractive ways to do this. And then we ended up with what people keep calling the penis noses. They were horrendous, but that's the truth, isn't it, Jonty? These aerodynamicists, they don't really give a damn how good the car looks. They just care about what those numbers say in the wind tunnel. And if it's ugly but it's quick, then they're happy. The fans might want a sexy looking car, but to aerodynamicists, it's just got to be quick, and that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're saying it's one interpretation or a less ugly version, because they get all of these details in just numbers. They don't get sort of any diagrams saying here, there, and everywhere. They just get the numbers and they draw up a sort of a 3D model of where things can go. That's how we ended up with the T-wing, because there was some overlap in the numbers that allowed a vertical sort of 50mm upright between the engine cover and the rear wing. They went, oh, we can stick something there. That's probably how we ended up with all the hideous X-wings and side wings and this, that, and the other wings. And what do you call them? The rhino horns that were on the McLarens of 2007 and 8?
Oh, the Viking horns.
Viking
around
horns.
the
I
airbox.
hated them.
Did you? I loved them.
No, not around the airbox. The ones on the nose.
Oh, I like them as well.
No,
I've got like
didn't
really
like
rubbish
them.
versions now, but I thought they looked quite cool.
But yeah, they'll make up their model of what can go where, and even though they're sort of trying to close off the loopholes, the guys designing it are always a lot smarter than the FIA. They will find something. It's like hackers. No matter how good their security is, they're always one step ahead, which is why it keeps happening.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, you look at Adrian Newey. He's. I can't remember. Somebody else had me in chat, I'm sure, but I can't remember how many titles he's won specifically, sort of as a designer at these teams, as technical director or whatever. But he's won so many, and you do that because you can find those loopholes. We've seen so many have mentioned the X-Wings there. I mean, I think this is actually, I was going to save it till later, but I mean, we'll do this quickly now, Jonty. I'm a little bit concerned about this technical innovation, and you know, Formula One is supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. We want to see development. We want to see innovation. I know things like the X-Wings and the rhino horns, as you call them, Jonty, aren't massively popular, but I love seeing things like that crop up, like DAS, for example. I like seeing stuff like that crop up because that's kind of not the point of Formula One, but I think an important ingredient of it is that the engineers will continue to design, will continue to develop, will continue to bring new crazy ideas. The bloody fan car, for example. I want to see things like that. And I know it's all about costs now and keeping them down, and maybe because of that we won't get to see that anyway, but I don't want this to end up as a spec series, and I do worry that this is the first step towards that. I mean, there's not a huge amount. You might be able to hear me in chat. Let me know. I don't know what on earth has just gone on there. I have no idea. The whole of OBS and everything just went out together, and it just dropped everything. I can't get back on Discord at the moment for Jonty, so bear with me a second, and I'll try and... Sorry about this. I had a feeling this was going to happen. I don't know why. What with one reason or another. So I shall sit for a second. If it keeps doing it, then we'll just we'll call it a day. I think I can hear Jonty. We're there. Yeah, I don't know what that was, mate. The whole thing just went blah. Yeah, but you can hear me all right now. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what I was saying. I think I was just talking about
innovations.
Yeah, concerned that we're going to lose some of that, but we've not actually got that much on the list that I've got that is spec. It's mostly stuff that I think they've said before that we're not going to notice as fans, but I don't want this to end up as Formula 1.5 or something like that. I want it to be F1. If I wanted to watch spec series, I'd watch F2 and to a slightly lesser extent Formula E.
Yeah, you're quite right with that. And see, the thing is, they've released these various regs and it doesn't really give us that many details. I'm still waiting to get my hands on some of the numbers. I want to see how some of these new areas are being regulated, like the Venturi tunnels, the winglets over the front wheels, how they're managing the rear wing now, which looks fairly standard. You know, they don't tell us enough about that, and we have to wait until testing or at least launches to see it. Well, that's one thing. I don't think we're going to see anything like the actual cars during launch. We'll pretty much see this with each team's new livery on it.
I was just going to say that because obviously normally we get like either render. Obviously, I think we're going to see a lot of emails. We're going to get a lot of renders this coming winter. I don't think we're going to see a huge amount of proper big launches in studios, like Ferrari did with all their dancers and all of that business. I don't think we're going to see any of that over the winter. And if we do, like you say, it'll be a very basic design, maybe even one of these, as you say, Jonty, with a different livery on it. So it's going to be fascinating because they're going to need to, because the development race next year is going to be mental. We know that. I mean, this year it's slowing off now. I think Mercedes are bringing their last update in either Hungary or Belgium, I think it is. So there's nothing really coming anytime this season. It's all gone nice and quiet, whereas next year it is going to be relentless, obviously within the cost cap, because we saw it in 2009, didn't we? In 2014, teams constantly trying to catch up, and that will cause the field to converge a little bit, which is good, but they're going to need to hide a hell of a lot over the winter because they don't want to be giving their secrets away. Mercedes don't want to be telling Red Bull what they're doing, and vice versa, and Ferrari are going to be keeping things close to their chest, and I think it might be exciting to see the cars with deliveries, but as I say, every winter when the cars are launched, don't expect this to be the same in Barcelona or Bahrain, wherever. Next year, just ignore the launches to a point, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But does it concern you a little bit that we won't see that innovation, Jonty? Like, are you worried that, I know that you don't like the rhino noses, for example, but does it worry you that we're not going to see somebody try something crazy, or do you think there's enough scope in there that somebody like an Adrian Newey will find something?
They're all going to find something, but like you say, the people like Adrian Newey and all the other great designers, they're the ones that are going to find that little bit more. And I'm sure there are still plenty of areas, like, for example, we've seen that I can already see some subtle changes in the car they showed off at Silverstone to the one that they rolled out last year. You know, where it was, they were largely renders, but there are definitely some changes between them. You know, they've made the end plates of the front wing a little bit shorter. There's now 4 elements in it. The winglets over the wheels, they've come into like only halfway over the wheel, where before they went all the way out. And now they've got a slot gap in them. You know, those are some of the areas that are definitely going to get a lot of work, particularly those winglets. They're going to be trying all sorts to try and get little extra wings and fins and sawtooth edges and all sorts on them, just to try and get more air down. And will we see things going back to more of the underside of the front wing that we had a couple of years ago, you know, before the big 2017 changes? All the various strakes and little notches and things to try and force that air down into the tunnels. That's going to be their main focus. Yeah.
I was reading up on, if you're not sure on what the regulations are, you or Jonty, you'll have been through them. I've been through them as well, but we've got so much that's different. I mean, we've got ground effects coming back. They sort of use them in a way now, don't they? They're not to the extent they're going to use them next year, but there has always been, or certainly recently, a reliance on airflow around the floor and under the car and that. So it's not, ground effects has never completely disappeared as far as I understand it. Certainly not as we've got sort of further into these modern day cars, but now it's coming back sort of, I don't even want to say full on, because it's not going to be as dramatic looking as we saw in the 70s, for example. So we've got the ground effects coming back. The front wings being simplified with the four elements on the front, and that's attached to the nose. And then we've got the simpler end plates. The rear wing is going to get rid of the end plates as well, effectively, I think is the point. We'll see if somebody can bring something in to replace those. We've got those wheel covers that have actually divided opinion quite a bit. I was quite surprised because I quite like them, but there you go. Limits also around the shaping of the brake ducts, barge boards are banned, and it's all to do with trying to allow these cars to follow more closely. I don't know if we've ever mentioned it or if anybody else has. These cars can't follow each other, and that's why we don't get an awful lot of close racing. I mean, even this year, where you talk about how good it's been, but actually we still see cars struggling into the dirty air. And if you've got the F1 2021 game, good lord, dirty air is horrific on that. But anyway, so the idea is that they're going to be able to keep, the following car should be able to keep hold of around 86% of its maximum downforce, as opposed to around 55%, which is what they've got now. So that could be quite a significant jump. And I hope, and I keep saying should, and that's the plan, and in theory, because we've seen so many times, haven't we, Jonty? F1 come up with regulation changes to fix a problem and then create 20 others.
Well, yeah, that is a fairly common occurrence when they change things, but they've spent quite a while working on this, and not, it's not just stuff on paper. Oh, we're going to ban this and bring this in, and not do any actual research, which has happened before. This time, they've really been studying it very hard and really testing everything. So I'm inclined to think it's going to work. And that extra downforce when they're following, that's going to make a massive difference. Certainly in particular tracks and in certain areas. You think about Monaco, although the size is more of an issue there. Even Silverstone, where we've just been, when you got Beckett's complex, they can be right behind each other, even side by side as they go in. But by the end of it, there's a massive gap that they've then got to make up on the hangar. But we're not going to have that now. They're going to be able to stay closer through those fast corners. The problem is, as some people have asked, they're still keeping DRS, which I don't understand. Even if it's going to be less effective, I don't see the point in keeping it.
I'm not sure. I think I'm going back a couple of years now. It's probably one of our first streams when we discussed it before. I think Ross Brawn had said something similar to they're keeping it as a bit of a get out of jail free card, just in case the regulations don't go the way they want it to go. I mean, looking at the car, it's got DRS. We know it's going to have DRS, but it will be completely different to what we see now, won't it, in terms of design, as the whole car will be. But I think that was the idea, is if these regulations don't work as intended, keep DRS just in case they need something to help with overtaking. But that also concerns me. If you spend so long designing a car that's supposed to be better for overtaking, and then you're like, but we'll keep this just in case, you sort of think, oh, God. But then at the same time, you think about how many times these engineers have found ways around the rules that have made it harder to follow, or have come up with something that isn't what they were expecting. So I think it's kind of like a get out of jail free card is the best way I can explain that. But that was a couple of years ago when he was saying that. I've not heard a huge amount about it since, but I'm kind of with you. I know we've got the system, the ERS system now, but I was much more. I think we've said this a lot on these streams as well, Jonty. I much preferred the driver deployed KERS that we used to have, where they can use it to attack, they can use it to defend. If they're keeping DRS, I'd much rather have it that drivers can use it. Maybe it's, again, still at specific parts of the track, but not just when they're a second behind. Drivers can use it to defend and to attack, but then that also completely removes the point of DRS, doesn't it? So you might as well just let them follow.
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement about that. The old KERS system, it had that tactical point to it. It was attack or defend. Or you could even just use it to try and make that gap when someone else is making a pit stop. It was always down to the driver. That's been the main problem with DRS all along, I think, because it is strictly for attacking, even when you've got two zones that are right next to each other with two detection points, because you use it to attack, and if you time it right, you get the next one to run away. So it's still all part of the attacking, and I'd like them to be able to have, the extra power. If someone gets up alongside, it's like, do I use it now or do I use it after the corner? It makes it much more entertaining, but we also have only 3 years of these engines, because there's all of the big talks for the new power units coming in 2025, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point as well, because I think they're going the wrong way with them. I really do.
I don't even know what's happening with the power unit. It's a genuine time. A couple of people in chat just asking about, don't they have the ERS now? They do, but I'm kind of more in favour of, because that works quite well. You've got effectively an overtake button there, haven't you? You can deploy that on the straight to defend if you need to, but I mean, get rid of DRS and make that a little bit more powerful, and so that a driver just smacks a button and then, I'm going to defend, I'm going to go on the attack. And I know very similar to what we have now and what we've had in the past, but it's a little bit more powerful and ditch DRS. But then I've never been a fan of DRS. I don't know why. I just think it's...
Yeah, I mean, the people asking this, if you weren't watching before these engines came in 2014, it was a completely separate unit to the engine. The battery and the motors were completely separate, and then for 7 seconds a lap, they could press a button and get 80 horsepower. But now it's completely mixed in with the engine. It's all managed by the full engine management system. The whole lot works together, and it's a big, complicated mess, which is why the cost has skyrocketed so much in the last 7 or 8 years, because it's just gone ridiculous. There's so much complexity, especially when they added in the MGUH as well, which caused no end of problems for a lot of teams, or a lot of engine manufacturers. And that's the wrong way to go with it, I think, because it's just, yes, it's made it more difficult for them to drive. You look at the amount of stuff that they have to mess about with on the steering wheel. That's just gone up and up and up in the last 7 years.
I feel like I should say so. A short view back to the past, something along those lines. But can you remember? I was just going to say on the cursing. Can you remember when they were first introduced and some teams didn't run it because of the weight that came with it? And you think, could you imagine that now?
Yeah,
it'd be crazy, wouldn't it, if they were like, "Oh, we're going to introduce." When they introduced DRS, but it's going to make your car a little bit heavier, and teams go, "Oh no, we won't use that." They soon all switched to KERS, didn't they? It didn't take them long. I know the regulations changed to sort of add them as part of it, but they also were pretty quick to go, actually that is worth it, especially at the starts. It used to be a monster at the start.
Yeah, because they were charging up on the formation lap, which I think was a little bit of a loophole in the rules. I think they could have dealt with that better. It was a tad unfair. But I'd love it if they could do that now. I'd love it if they had a system where, I don't know, maybe it was a power limit, or maybe even a weight limit for the power unit. You know, and let them get there however they like. That'd be fantastic.
Be interesting, yeah. I don't know. I mean, let me know. We'll get to Q&A in a bit, and we'll talk about it if you've got any questions on DRS, or even just let me know what you think about keeping it. Is it just, would you keep it if you were Ross Brawn as an insurance policy, or would you perhaps do away with it and introduce kinetic energy recovered giraffes or something? I don't know. I'm sure somebody will come up with something amazing in the chat. But just on the engines, actually, the only thing sort of changing for next year is that the fuel they use will have to be made up of at least, and you can tell I got this from somewhere because I know nothing about this kind of thing, at least 10% of advanced sustainable ethanol. So that's the only thing changing with power units next year, aside from the fact that they will also be frozen until at least 2025. That was Red Bull that were pushing for that one, wasn't it? After Honda announced they were leaving. So 2025, these engines will be as they are, and then we're getting to, I think it's, the feeling seems to be, or the word on the street, if you like, seems to be that the power units will be pretty much the same in 25, but without the MGUH. I personally, I know we're talking about 22, but just very quickly on this, I personally, and I don't know what you think, Jonty, I'd rather see them now sort of move away perhaps from hybrid and sort of look more towards sustainable fuels, the old, what's the word I'm looking for? Eco fuels, that kind of thing, and go back to a screaming V8 or a V10, and then become more road relevant and more sustainable through the fuel, rather than looking towards an all electric future. That's just me, but I don't know what you think, Jonty. I'll come to Charles in a minute.
Well, that's one of the things that's been talked about in many of the discussions and articles I've read about the 2025 power units. One of the big talking points is going to fully sustainable fuel. That one of the plans is to make the fuel with recaptured carbon from the atmosphere, powered by 100% sustainable sources, solar, wind, or what have you. So the cars themselves, the ICE element of the engines will be carbon negative, not just neutral. It'll be negative. So why not go back to the V8s and ditch the batteries? There's no reason not to. You even go back to the V12s, because it'll be cheaper overall anyway, and it'll keep everyone happy.
Yeah, I'd take a V8. I think when we first switched to V8s, it was like, oh, these are awful, but they still screamed, didn't they? They weren't quite a V10, but they were still very nice noises. And I know noise isn't everything when you watch it on telly, but when you're at a racetrack, it's part of the show, isn't it? It's part of the spectacle. So, I don't know, hydrogen keeps getting bandied about, and Ross Brawn has said they're not ruling that out for the future, but we'll see where they go on that one. Thank you so much to Charles Edward Cheese, He's there again. Says it's hump day. It is indeed, with 2 camel emojis. It is hump day. I don't like what that insinuates, but thank you very much, mate, for your incredibly generous contribution once again. Absolutely incredible, mate. It blows me away every time. The only thing I can say tonight, Charles, is I can't promise we'll get to 500 likes for you, unfortunately, because that would mean everybody watching the stream needs to hit that like button now, and I don't think they will. So if we can get to 250, which is 150 more than we have now for Charles, that'll be amazing. We'll make up for it on a race reaction stream and get a few more in. But thank you so much, mate. That is absolutely incredible. Thank you again.
You do the other 2. I think they were relevant.
Yes, I'm going to Streamlabs. I'm hoping, as I click now on Streamlabs, that the PC won't crash itself or something. But Zach B, thank you very much as well, is what I'm trying to say. Says they always said heavy regulations are to combat cost. Now there's an alternate way to combat cost, so the regulations need to loosen up. And Andrew Barron, thank you very much for your contribution as well, says the saving grace about the front wing is that it isn't the only solution. Teams can experiment and create different concepts, which should be cool indeed. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with on the front wing, on the rear wing, parts of this car. Again, disclaimer, if you're just tuning in, that will not be the car we see next year. But just intrigued by what Zach's saying there, an alternate way to combat costs. So the regulations need to loosen up. I'm trying to think what that alternate way is, Jonty.
Well, one is the cost cap.
Well, of course, yeah.
But I mean, that's definitely a direct something that has to be considered as well. Because look at the intricacy of these cars. They haven't got all the tiny little flips and flaps all over the place that we've got now. But you're looking at the curved shapes like the rear wing and how the mounts are done. You know, there's a hell of a lot of complexity in the carbon fiber molds for that. You know, I've only looked into it briefly at a factory that does carbon fiber, not for Formula One, and there's a hell of a lot of skill and cost just in getting these things into the mold. Have they done enough research on that side of things? You know, by keeping the regulations tight, and they're making it harder for the less funded teams because they've got to try and stick to these regulations when it's far more expensive to actually make the parts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I follow. I think we've kind of discussed it before, haven't we? About, would you go as far as say false economy to a point?
Potentially, but unfortunately, we're not going to know any of that until the financial reports come out at the end of next year. Or maybe Gene Haas sort of puts out a statement complaining about it next summer break.
Maybe. There's a lot that I look forward to about next year, and I know the car that we've seen isn't popular, and we all know it's going to be very different, but it got me a little bit hyped. And I feel I want, we chatted on Sunday, didn't we? And I feel like it was right to consider talking about this today because it got lost in everything else, and it kind of got forgotten. And I know we all know that next year is going to be massive in terms of the regulations. I'd say people keep saying the biggest ever in Formula One. It's right up there, possibly is the biggest ever. It's a whole new change of philosophy almost on the aero. So I'm really hyped for next year. But just a couple of other things changing for anybody who's not sure. We're going to 18-inch wheel rims, which look... I'm not even going to say it. They look so good on track, even on this year's cars. We've had some tyre testing this week, again for Pirelli, and it looks just so good. It really, really does, and I'm very excited to see that. And they're going to include some sensors as well, so they can manage or keep an eye, track tyre temperatures and pressures during the race a little bit better than they can now. That'll all be fresh in your minds from Baku. I'm sure suspension, it's been made simpler, specifically how it attaches to the wheels, and then they've banned hydraulic suspension as well. Parts classification, so they're all going to get listed into 5 groups. We've got listed parts, and that's parts that a team must design and own the intellectual property, the IP for. Transferable parts, things that can be supplied from one team to another. So, as an example, Williams are taking the Mercedes gearbox next year, and that would come under the transferable parts classification. Prescribed parts are bits that teams can build, but to a set specification. open source parts of things that are free for teams to design to their own specification, but the design has got to be available to all teams, and a standard supply components, and that's things that are, as I understand it, designed and manufactured by a specific or a designated supplier, and that's stuff like the tire sensor that I was talking about there. So there are things changing throughout the regulations, and we've got the second year of the cost cap as well. So I think this feels like a very good starting point. This isn't the end either, by the way. This is... I'm going to sound so negative, because I don't mean to, because I am genuinely excited about next year, and I do hope these rule changes work. But what I will say is the plan is to make these cars easier to follow, to make closer racing, to make it more exciting for the fans. However, there is a very good possibility that a Mercedes, a Red Bull, a Ferrari, hell, even a Williams or a Haas could absolutely knock it out of the park and dominate like Mercedes did in 2014 for a few years. There's every possibility that could happen. So we've got to be patient with these rules. We might not get the close field that we've got now. We might see it spread a little bit more, but it will come together. That's the theory. And what I would say as well is that, and I don't know how you feel about this, Jonty, I feel like these regulations are more about making F1 as a sport more sustainable, so it is around in 70 years, rather than just leaving things as they are and it all falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe not 70 years. In 70 years' time, it will be F0. Straight from the SNES. I'm absolutely certain of that. But it's definitely got to... I think the thing it needs to do is cement this focus on it being the ultimate in the technological advances of racing cars and the fastest around a circuit. They really need to stick to that, because Formula E is only gaining in popularity. IndyCar is massively gaining in popularity, certainly in Europe. It's had some great races, and obviously you've got names like Grosjean going over there, who's made everyone go, oh, well, I liked watching him. I'll go watch him in IndyCar, and then realizing that the racing is absolutely fantastic, even on the ovals, for those who don't want to admit it. So this is going in that direction, but it's going to tie in so strongly to 2025, and they've got to get that right. They can get these cars as perfect as you like, and if they're suddenly lacking way behind anyone else in the power stakes, it's all going to be for nothing.
These cars are going to be heavy, though, aren't they? These 22 cars are really heavy, so that's a concern as well. But I suppose, like, just to pick up on your point there, I suppose the idea is now get these regulations, and I think that was kind of what was alluded to when they were first announced. Get these regulations right, tweak them as needed for 2021, as it was at the time, now 22. And then if the aero's sorted, then they can focus on 25. But you're right, we're going to have these for a few years, and then we're going to another rule change with the power units. And if the power units need to be bigger or smaller or a different shape or whatever, I don't think they will be. Doesn't sound like they'll be that drastic, but if they do, we might then see even more aero regulations change, because they've got to fit them in. And it's just, it would be nice, and we're seeing it this year, the effect, what it can do. It would be nice if Formula One could just pick a set of bloody rules and stick to them for a while. I feel like I love a regulation change, but you look at how the fields converge this year, because they've barely changed from last year, aside from the floor and a couple of other things. If they can get these right, and in 25, we could have these cars for a while, and it's going to make the racing better. But changing them, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a period of time where Formula One hasn't made tweaks and changes to the rules. But I feel like recently, when you look at things like, you had the big rule change in 2014, then you had whatever the cluster flip was that was 2017, and then they made changes again for 19 and 21, and let's get some rules that work, and let's stick with them, because I want to see Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, and then I want to see your Fernando Alonso's, maybe not in 10 years, bless him, but your Fernando Alonso's, Kimi will still be there, and other drivers in the midfield getting a shot at a podium, causing an upset. That's what we want to see, and that's why I'm enjoying this season. I just worry that, you know, we get to a point where we have this exciting championship, and then suddenly we're all going to split off again and separate, because we've got to have another rule change. I get these completely behind them, because it is for the long term, but just, like I say, get a set of rules, Jonty, stick to them predominantly, and let's see where we end up from there. They've got to work, of course.
Yeah, they have. And as much as I'd like them to stick to it, what I can see happening is probably something like a game launch. We're going to get these in 2022, and we're going to see what happens. And then 2023, we might get a patch. You know what I mean?
I
Where
like
they go, "Oh, this wasn't quite how we intended when we put it all into practice on track. So we're going to change that. And this other thing seems to have been exploited too much. So we're going to change that." You know, I can see little changes probably every year, but they won't be the massive changes, and they won't be unfocused. Like the 2017 changes was such a disaster. I'm sorry, but they were. Even though everyone says about the Mercedes dominance of 2014, 15, 16, at least those two at the front were still constantly fighting each other, and behind them, everyone was still fighting each other. You know, the grid wasn't quite as spaced out as people think. But then 2017 came along because F1 wanted to just be the fastest. They didn't focus on the technology. And, well, it certainly killed Monaco. It looks great. No, so on 28, you're absolutely right. It looks beautiful. But it was so wide. Wide, boy. It may as well have been a BMW M8.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They looked great. They did look fantastic, but I kind of depressed at what you just said there, Jonty. They've destroyed Monaco, but I think you're right. You're right. They're too long. They're too wide. They're too heavy. They're not built for that track. And you know, I know Monaco's never been one for overtaking. That's kind of not really the point of Monaco, is it? Never really has been. Maybe in the early days, perhaps, but not sort of in more modern day F1. But you still want to see people close. You still want to see opportunities for overtakes. Just, you know, those wild ones up the inside of the Nouvelle Chicane, which is no longer new, but we'll still call it that, moves into Saint-Devote used to happen, and you used to get something, but we don't see that anymore, and it's a shame in many ways. And I did pick up on that Sawn 28 one. You called that one out though, Jonty, so thank you for that. And Mayank says, we all know that F1 would change stuff every day if they want. Remember when they made aero changes for 2019 after Australia 2018 was boring and they reacted too quickly? They're too knee-jerk sometimes, aren't they, Formula One? They are very knee-jerk, and sometimes you just have to wait.
Yeah, that's true. They are. But sometimes so are we as the fans. I mean, 2010 is a classic example of that. You know, there was a couple of tiny little tweaks to the rules after 2009. And then the first race was Bahrain Endurance. And everyone was, oh my God, Formula One's completely dead. Because the track was absolute rubbish. But then we got the Australia race, and it's one of the best races I've ever watched. So things can happen. And we have to be a little bit allowing as well. We shouldn't be quite as knee-jerky. I just wish they would be less knee-jerky on... Here we go, here he goes again, on the safety side of things. Make a conscious decision and think about things. Don't just do something. Like just employing the understudy.
I don't know what to say to that, because I don't want to say anything that will set you off. We'll be here all night. Yeah. I mean, this car has been designed with safety in mind as well. Apparently, lessons learned too from the Grosjean incident. So I think, you know, safety is taken seriously, but it does feel sometimes too reactive rather than proactive. And I know you can't anticipate every single freak accident. Of course you can't. But then also at the same time, here he goes again. We saw cars nearly ploughing into tractors in gravel traps in the past, and they were still allowed to go out there, and we lost Jules Bianchi. So, you know, there are certain things that are freak incidents that can't be I suppose they can be foreseen. You could think of anything, I suppose, if you're dark enough, but they can't really be foreseen. They can't really prepare for that. But then there are incidents that you get warnings for years and years and years, and they just let it go. But if I get onto that, we are really here all night because it still winds me up. To see a couple of...
Yeah.
Go on, John.
I was going to say, I should say that the safety aspect isn't totally irrelevant here, because we all want the cars to be a bit smaller for the tighter tracks like Monaco, even to some extent Hungary, possibly Baku. But unfortunately, it's the safety that's restricting that. That's why the cars have become so big, as well as the battery packs and what have you. But it's the additional side impact structures, the additional clearance space at the front of the car. Like that. I think there's nearly a meter of the nose that is 100% hollow and can only be crash structure. Nothing in it at all. That's a hell of a lot. You go a meter back from the front of the Jordan 191 that we saw Mick driving, and that's roughly where I think the driver's knees, possibly a bit further up. So that's something that is going to have to stay. They're never going to get any shorter, and the body of the cars probably isn't going to get any narrower, but they can certainly make the tyres narrower and the wheel track.
Sartorius, is that the name? I probably butchered it. It says, I feel like I disagree with everything that's been said. That's fine, mate. I've always said this. It's about opinions. It'd be boring if we all agreed. So it's great to get some opinions in there. And I'll try and see if I can find some of yours in chat, and I'll read some of your views out on that one. So please don't ever feel like you have to agree with us. Nobody's in on Sunday. World champions did, but let's leave that one. We're not getting into it. Jonty, do not let me get into that, for God's sake. We'll be here kicking off all night. But yeah, I think so what I'll tell you what there, Jonty, just on the car, because I've kind of titled it as specifically the car, but it was more about the whole of what's coming up in 2022 in the future. But just on the car, is there something you specifically love about it and something you absolutely hate about it? Is there anything you do that, or is it just a car that you look at and go, well, I like that, that'll do?
I specifically love the addition of the Venturis, letting them, not fully, but properly try to use ground effect again. I still want to know how they're going to be regulating this, because I've seen, is it the placement of the tunnels from the center axis? Is it the cross-sectional area of the tunnels? Is it how tall they are, how thin they are? Do the teams have any freedom in that? That's very important, I think. The one thing I hate is probably those winglets over the wheels. I know they're important. I know what they're for. But it just smacks too much of the old wheel covers we had, which used to just explode into a million pieces and lead to very long, drawn-out safety cars with brooms.
Yeah, I don't know. Could make pit stops a bit tricky as well at speed, couldn't they? In some ways, wallop one of them a few times. You don't want to be doing that. Do you know, it's weird. I do genuinely like most of the car from the front wheels back. I can't get on board with the nose. It does seem too high. It's been ruined by people like Jack, as I said earlier, who now make me think of Nigel Thornberry or Chase Carey when I see it, because it looks like a mustache. Now you with your Dr. Robotnik nonsense, waltzing in here with that. But I do like it overall. But something that I was looking at before we went live, about an hour before we went live, actually, that I hadn't really paid much attention to. I know the Halo is more into...
Is it a refresh job?
We're green. I've refreshed it.
Yeah, it's something I wasn't sure whether to bring it up or not. With you mentioning the Halo, the one thing that does bother me is the fact that there hasn't been a look to integrating the IndyCar's aero screen. I know a hell of a lot of people would be against it for the pure racing open cockpit reasons, but it fills up that last gap and it looks awesome. I'm sorry, but it does. It makes them look like bloody stealth fighters or something. I'm amazed the FAA hasn't put more work into trying to integrate that aero screen into the new F1 car. And I can't think of any reason why, other than public opinion of how it looks.
I mean, first of all, just on that last point, the FIA and F1 need to stop worrying about public opinion. Not completely. There's a point they have to, because, if people aren't watching, then that's the end of that. When it comes to safety, it doesn't matter what people think. People were very anti-Halo. I don't know how many lives it saved. It's more than one, that's for sure. And we know of one in Bahrain who it absolutely bloody saved. In fact, Romain Grosjean was anti-Halo completely, wasn't he? And then he's sort of saying, without that, I'm not here anymore. So they were right to stick with that. But I actually completely disagree. I think the aero screen looks horrific. From a safety point of view, you're right, with all the bits flying around and that, it would make more sense to close that gap off. But I think it looks awful. I really, really do.
Oh, we're disagreeing.
I don't know what it is.
Like that hasn't happened 100 times before.
I like you saying sort of like a fighter pilot thing, but it just, I can't put my finger on it. I never thought I'd say these words. I actually think the Halo is better looking. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Halo is not there for aesthetics. We know that, but yeah, I'm just really, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you Halo, aero screen? Let me know in chat, and I'll keep an eye and see if we get. I think actually soon we'll be able to have polls to the chat, so that'll be handy for future streams. Actually, I think YouTube are bringing that out. It's in beta. I think it might be new. I don't know, but I'm not a fan of it. Just me. There you go. I'll read some super chats out. Then a couple of super chats have come in. Thank you very much to Adam M for becoming a new member. Now, I think it was Max that reminded me. I'm sorting memberships out in the summer break. I'm fully aware I said that last summer break. I'm fully aware I said that over Christmas, but I have got a list now of things I'm doing this summer break, and it is on there. So I'll sort something out, even if it's just emotes or something. I will sort something out this summer, I promise on that one. So thank you very much for becoming a new member. Robbie Begg says, great to hear Jonty again. What team do you think is best positioned to make a big step forward next year? Would personally say McLaren. I think McLaren are in a very strong position. I think not to the very front of the grid, Jonty, but I think Williams and Haas are in a very good position because they've started early, haven't they? And they've kind of, I mean, Haas basically gave up last year, didn't they, on this year's car, apart from the stuff they had to change the regulations. But I think they could make a nice leap forward. But I think McLaren's a good shout there.
Yeah, McLaren are in a great position to make a big leap forward, but have they made too much of a leap forward now? See, that's something that could potentially sting them with the cost cap in its second year, slightly lower. Have they put too much into this year? Because they've clearly put a lot in, because that is a very good car. Seidel's been working magic. So, you know, I hope they haven't wasted their opportunity, and I'm certain they will come forward. But I think, Haas are definitely in a position to get better because they can't get worse. Alpine.
That's a good shout.
They've got that Alonso knowledge during all this development time. He must be giving them so much golden information, even if it's only from a sim.
That's a great shout. And on Haas, yeah, they can't get any worse. If they get any worse, they'll be an F2. I mean, they can't get much worse than they are, can they? Yeah, Alpine's a good shout with Alonso. Maybe Alfa Romeo if Kimi sticks around, or do you think maybe Kimi doesn't give... I don't know. I can't read Kimi. I've never been able to read Kimi at all, ever. Since he debuted in 2001, I've not been able to read him. I don't know if he maybe gives the same insight as Alonso, or whether he's a bit more, you get on with it, ask me if you need out sort of thing. Probably the latter. But maybe Alfa could make that leap forward as well. Aston Martin, I'm just going to name every team. You know what's going to happen. I'm going to name all bloody 10 of them. But Aston Martin, good money behind them.
Aston. Yeah, because they've got Vettel.
Seb, yeah.
You're right in saying that about Kimi. He's so hard to read. We really can't get an idea of whether he gives great feedback to the team or not. He must get some good feedback, or else he never would have got as far as he has. Because he's got to give good feedback just to set up the car during practice. But for development, we have no idea whatsoever. Maybe that's one of the cool, weird things about him.
One of many. Not in like a bad way. I think Kimi's ace. I mean, he's always been quite mellow, hasn't he? But he's practically horizontal now. He really is. I love that. He has his moments. Good Lord, does he? But yeah, I was looking for some stuff the other day for it's a few weeks ago actually, for streams or videos or something. I went back to 2001 and found some pictures of Kimi for something, and I know he's aged, but really he's not changed at all, has he? Just kind of become a bit more mature, but he's still just as mellow as he ever was. So yeah, on the aero screen. And if you've got any questions, by the way, pop them in and I'll start to read some out now for the next 20 minutes or so. But just on the aero screen, I'll go to the first one I can spot. Couple of people saying it would be heavier. Space says, I hate the screen too. Ryan Ahmed says, close cockpit. It looks like a dog's cone, says Roller. That's true. Dan Philpott's unsubscribing with his second account. He'll probably resubscribe with his third account, and that's fine. Looks good in IndyCar, wouldn't in F1, says Owen. The screen looks cheap. That's Space adding to what he said before. Indy drivers were complaining how hot they were getting inside of the cockpit, says Minty1.
Yeah, that is a concern. They haven't quite perfected that yet.
Silvio says, nah, get rid of the halo. Obviously in favour of the aero screen, I'm assuming there. I wouldn't get rid of the halo now. It's proven its worth. It saves one life. It's already done its job, hasn't it? I think it looks great on some angles, not so much on others. I think my aero screen issue is from the front, it looks horrendous. Again, I know safety isn't about aesthetics, but my word, it just doesn't look great. Alfie says it can be improved, but it doesn't look terrible. Dusk Graven says, I don't mind the screens. They look better than the central bar of the halo. F1 fan, Vesk, RC, Minty, Basil, Nat, Mary, all saying Halo, as is Robbie and Eric. Sandy says they need a fighter jet style bubble canopy. Oh, they teased one of those at one point, didn't they? But then they realised that how the hell are we opening that if the car's upside down? What's the issue with that one? So that would look very cool, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, a full fighter canopy would look awesome. It would be by far the safest, but they would also have to make the entire cockpit completely impenetrable and completely impervious to fire. You know, it would have to. It works this way in powerboat racing. I don't know if anyone's ever watched powerboat racing. You should. It's very hard to get hold of, but it's absolutely crazy. But their safety thing, it's complete. The cockpit breaks away entirely and just tumbles around and then is just floating to be picked up. It's completely separate from all of the other systems in the car, systems in the boat. And that would make the costs for Formula One absolutely skyrocket. You mean how are you going to control the front wheels if you haven't got a shaft going through the cockpit? You know, it's going to be difficult.
Black Hawk So has just answered a question I was going to ask you about, actually, Jonty. I was just reading the chat, but IndyCar are having to pump air into the drivers' helmets to try and deal with the heat, which isn't great. I was going to ask you what that tube was that I keep seeing on IndyCar drivers. Now I know. It's to cool them down. It's aircon. Genius.
Yeah, there's actually two little... there's two slots at the bottom of the aero screen where air can come in. I think one of them is for driver cooling, one is for component cooling. But it still really doesn't do a good enough job, as they found out at some of the hotter races.
So I'll answer some of your questions in a sec. I was just reading something random there on my notes, but it doesn't matter. It was something else. So, yeah, please do drop a like. We are 3 away from that 250 for Charles Edward Cheese. I don't think we're going to get to 500 tonight, but if we can get a few more on, that'd be massively appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new as well, so you don't miss out on any future content. There should be a video out between now and the end of the week. Kind of depends how tomorrow goes. I'll talk to you about that later, Jonty. But thank you to Jijo, is it? Also Channel 01, and Dylan and Justin, who have all subscribed. Thank you very much. So don't forget to smack that like button, as these YouTuber folks say, and subscribe and stuff. Let's do some questions. Now, it is so hot, by the way. I don't care how hot it is anywhere else. I keep getting told off like, oh, it's 40 degrees there every day, even in the middle of the night. It's like, yeah, but 15 degrees is too much for me.
People need to realise our houses are made for winter.
Yeah, like all the
when
time.
When it gets to summer, they're knackered. There is one question. That's how Sinky's asking, the airbox above. Why is it protruding outwards? And I can't say I've looked at it.
A protruding outlet?
Outwards.
Outwards?
I think there's a large undercut underneath the...
Yeah, there is. I see what you mean.
I think that's the what constitutes the sling point for lifting the cars with the cranes. But it doesn't really look... Yeah, it doesn't look the best. Although I hope Alpine's, if this is sort of a general idea of what we're going to get, I hope Alpine sort out their airbox because that's going to look hideous.
I can't unsee that now. Somebody pointed that out in the testing streams. I was like, good Lord, that's absolutely horrendous. Let's see what you guys are saying. We had lots of opinions of the Halo before, and now we don't really notice it. Maybe our opinions on the aero screen will go the same way, says Jason Rogers. Very good point. I think as F1 fans, we're all a little bit reluctant for change, aren't we? A little bit skeptical of it because we've seen so much of it over the years and it's not always gone the way that we want it to. But, you know, the Halo, we all hated it. I'm sure there are people that still hate it now, but we've kind of got over it, haven't we? We need something to make the drivers a bit more identifiable. That's the only thing I would say on the Halo. I did see somebody ask, and I'm not going to be able to find it now that I want to know, am I? Which is going to really, really annoy me. Somebody asked about the banning or stopping repairs under red flag situations. I know it's a bone of contention after the weekend again, but with red flags being a lot more frequent, do you think maybe there needs to be a stop on what can be repaired, or maybe a limit to what can be repaired, Jonty? Or do you think safety has got to come first, and if the repairs are needed, they're absolutely needed? Tough one.
Yeah, it depends what it is. I mean, they could. Obviously, safety is a concern, but depending on what it is, I mean, you could have teams say, "Oh, there's a tiny little flap broken on the front wing, so we need to change it for safety reasons," when actually there isn't, and they just wanted to change it because it gets rid of all the rubber they've picked up and is 100 grams lighter. You know, that's the kind of thing that you would expect teams to do. That they're right that it's a problem because it goes back. What year was the Monaco race?
Oh, don't get me started on that.
2012, 13, perhaps, maybe even 11, where it was like the ultimate showdown. Jensen was flying around, almost guaranteed to win, assuming he could pass. And then we had a red flag with 3 laps to go, and everyone changed tyres, and it was fine. Like, completely ruined someone's entire race with a simple regulation. So it definitely needs looking at.
That was a cracking race, wasn't it? Oh, it really was until that moment. So, yeah, definitely. But then Osama makes a very good point. It's an equal advantage. Everyone gets to fix at a red flag. Everybody can do it, can't they? So, yeah, it's a difficult one. I think if it comes down to safety, they've got to let them change it. But I think maybe make it an FIA call. But then you're going to need 20 stewards, aren't you? But make it an FIA call. Hey, our front wing's broken. They come along and go, no, it isn't. You've just got tyre rubber in there. Pick it out or tough. But if it's broken, then maybe.
Yeah, but it also depends how something got broken. Like if 2 drivers come together, one and they both end up with a broken front wing, that's fine. You know, they're both suffering equally or gaining equally. But say someone's broken their floor by constantly going wide onto curbs, and then during the red flag they can sort of tape it up and get it back to normal. Or if someone's like lost a front wing end fence by doing that, why is it fair that they can fix it when they're the only one that's at fault? You know, they haven't crashed with someone. They just kept going wide over the curbs, broken the front wing, and then they get to change it for free. That's where the problem is.
Gingerfest says if you repair under red flag, you go to the back of the line. It's an idea, isn't it?
Certainly for some things. I mean, you know, could certain parts be given a set time penalty? You know, if you've got to change your front wing, you get 5 seconds on your time. If you've got to change your rear wing, you get 20 seconds on your time. Could work.
I wouldn't allow changing tyres unless it was for like a puncture or something, or concern over a puncture because of debris. Although then you lose things like Gasly's win at Monza, don't you? You lose those magical moments, but at the same time, it is the same for everybody. I get that, but that takes away one element that kind of can spice up a race very nicely, is strategy. You lose that then, don't you? So, I don't know. There's so many ways you could go with it. It's absolutely crazy. I just saw a great question. They're all great questions. You're always asking us great questions. Anonymous says, what's going to happen to the F2 and F3 cars? I've not seen anything on that. I assume they'll just get done by someone like Dallara again, and then they seem to get a little bit closer, don't they, each time to what F1 cars look like. So you'll probably find that the next generation of F2 cars look like the F1 cars we have now, and nothing like the 2022 cars. Maybe that's the way to save money, Jonty. Filter them down. Instead of scrapping them, send them to F2. You wouldn't want to get in a Haas, though, would you? From this year, that's for sure. It doesn't quite work, I know, but it's just a thought. It wouldn't be spec anymore.
I think both F2 and F3 are set for a few years now, and I also think F4 are about to be set because there's a lot of new F4 cars coming to championships with the Halo now. So from next year, I think they'll all be set for a good. Well, as Tyler says, confirmed for 3 years. So
okay. I can't pronounce his name, and I'm so sorry, dude. You know who you are. It says, right now, no deep thinking. What was your favourite era of F1 so far? For me, it was I guess the first era I really remember, and that's the late 90s, early 2000s for me. 100%.
Ooh. Even though I wasn't around to see it, I have to say 60s up until the Aero started. Just because it was 100% on driver and true engineer skill, not aerodynamicist.
Mr. Pudding says, what if the cars ran on pudding? They'd smell amazing, that's for sure. Not that cars don't smell amazing now, by the way. I don't know if is that weird? I love the smell of...
What if we had diesel?
Ooh.
But you know the diesel you can make at home out of chip fat? Can you imagine that? You go to a race and everyone's just craving chips all the time.
It's certainly... Yeah, Silverstone would make a fortune, wouldn't they? Definitely across the weekend. Most racetracks would. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Sorry for the pause there. I'm reading somebody else's conversation. I shouldn't do it. Let's see if we've got some more questions then. Keep popping them in and we'll get through as many as we can. Seeing some people asking about TV graphics. Black Hawk says, I do really like what they are doing with the TV graphics on the Halo over the weekends. Makes a feature of them on the onboards. I agree. I like that. It's kind of like a band, isn't it, around the Halo with the speed and all of that business on it. I do like that. I think they look great. Been off the AWS, though. Jonty, specifically, I'm going to set him off now, you watch. Specifically, the tyre performance graphic. I'll go make a drink.
Yes, absolutely, because it's just pure guesswork and conjecture. Some of the other stuff they brought in is great. I love seeing sort of what I assume is live from telemetry cornering speeds and stuff like that. But get rid of the stuff that's just guesswork or apparently algorithm. Like this one that's coming this year with cars using, driver is using 99.2% of the car's capability. Shut up.
It's all right, mate. I'm here for you. It's fine. No, I mean, some of them are good. I like the braking comparison we see with the AWS graphics. I really like that. And Tyler Nash, yeah. I'm not going to word it like that, but completely agree. The qualifying pace graphic, what is the point in that? If I want to know who's going to be on pole, guess what I'll do? Watch qualifying. I don't need to see. I think the graphics are always generally so wrong. I do like the savageness, though, sometimes, of like Mazepin will be like P17 in practice and it'll say unexpected result. I mean, that's pretty savage, isn't it? But no, I think some of it, they've gone too far. Maybe rein it in a little bit, but then it's about engaging an audience, isn't it? And bringing new people in and helping them understand the sport. So I get why they're doing it. And maybe it's because we've been watching for a long time, Jonty. I don't know. I've done 3 decades. You've had a few more years than me, but I just think it's a little bit much. But hey,
I mean, don't get me wrong. We all like stats.
Yeah, of course we do.
Most, if not all, well, certainly not all, but most motorsport fans like stats. We like seeing all the little details and what have you, and that's fine. It's part of it. But they've just gone too far with AWS. Technology for TV is fantastic now. Add the AWS graphics as a second subtitle channel. So you click on your subtitles. One is subtitles, and the other is add the AWS graphics. Bingo. Then you can see them if you want to.
It's an idea. It's a good idea. I mean, they've got the Sky Race Control, and you've got it on the app as well, haven't you? The F1 app. So that'll be cool if they can get that on TV for everybody to use like all the time. Would be fantastic. Sawn28 says, do you think Albon will be back in 2022 because Yuki is really not delivering and Honda is pulling out? Yuki struggled, but I think I said it on Sunday. I think he's sort of. It sounds really condescending. I don't mean it. He's sort of mellowed out a little bit, hasn't he, Jonty? I wonder if they've sort of, because he's moved to Italy, close to the factory now. I wonder if he has been sat down and just told, look, you've got to chill out. You can't go hero to zero every weekend. You've got to learn. You've got to develop. Just take it easy a little bit. He does seem to have mellowed out a little bit, and he's improving, which is good. And that's what he needs to do, just improve and be consistent. I don't think he'll go anywhere. I think both Red Bull lineups will be the same next year as they are now, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think so. No disrespect intended to Yuki, but I do believe that he got that drive as part of, even if he didn't know it, but I think he got that. I think he's aware that he got that drive as a part of a deal between Red Bull and Honda for them to be able to buy out the intellectual property for making the engines themselves next year. So I think he felt a hell of a lot of pressure on him at the start of the year and has just taken that time to chill out. Not many people seem to think this, but when you look at the other options that seat had, surely you would have just put Albon back in. It's the only logical reason for Yuki getting the seat over Alex.
I would have. If it was up to me, I'd have just dropped Albon down there for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I don't think he was that bad. I think when he was in the Toro Rosso, he did okay, and he was coming along quite nice. He was rushed into that Red Bull because Gasly wasn't ready, who they also rushed into the Red Bull. But also because I would love to have seen Gasly versus Albon in an identical car, in a team they were both very comfortable in. I think that would have been incredible, to be honest, Jonty. I'd have loved that.
You don't see them competing. You're just like, right, you're even now. Fight. That's basically what you want.
Yeah. That's all I want. That's all I want to see is fighting. Not literally, although, No, I was going to say I like boxing, but I don't like boxing. That would have been a complete lie. A complete lie. Billy says tyre graphics are a joke. I saw somebody, it is RC Ritter there, saying I wouldn't mind actual tyre temps, but made up of percentage. I would like to see the heat thermal thingies that we used to have, the overlay cameras. They were brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anyone here who is new enough where you didn't get to see that? Because they stopped it quite a while ago now. It was a good 5 years or so, I think.
Trying to think the last time we saw it. Yeah, it must be. They were definitely on in, were they 2017? I seem to recall them being around. Maybe not, no. It was a while ago, wasn't it? But they were great. They were fantastic. It was just, if you didn't know what they were, it was essentially sort of, from the T-cam, there was a thermal imaging camera that showed you how hot the tyres were. And that was brilliant. That's kind of real-time data, which is, I think, more exciting than, I think the right front is at 10%, and then it lasts another 30 laps. It's like, well, it wasn't at 10% then, was it? But anyway, I thought they were great. Definitely not 2017, says Ikran. 2015 was last, I guess, says Mayank. Perez was in a Sauber then, says Raul. That's true. Yeah.
It was particularly good if someone locked up. Because you could see the flat spot going round as it was boiling hot.
It was just something a bit more interesting, wasn't it? Just something to keep. I don't know. Keep your question cool. I'll do a couple more before we wrap things up today, question-wise. People saying they love the battle forecast. Quite like that. It does give you an idea. Striking distance in 2 laps is always good to see. So, yeah, I guess
it adds some tension.
Yeah. One thing I don't like about AWS, I'm sure she's a lovely little girl as well, but it's the girl who's like, how do they know that? Oh, shh. Because my mum would have said, see, the mum's kind of like really calm about it. My mum would be like, because they do. And that's all I'd have got as a kid. Keep your nose out, but there you go. Anyway, what was that? Oh, flares. I sort of said fires in Zandvoort. I was like, flares in Zandvoort, how bad will they be? They were quite intense, weren't they, at Austria? So the atmosphere at Zandvoort is going to be incredible.
It's going to be an amazing atmosphere. It really is. And as for flares, I'd go far enough to say that it could potentially delay the start of the race. We've seen how mad that smoke can be from the flares when they're at Spa and when they're at Spielberg.
Adam M says, IndyCar aero screen is not great, but I know it's best for safety. Jules Bianchiette and Senna Felipe Massa, Justin Wilson, C. Pocono, 2015. Thank you very much for your contribution, mate. Yeah, like I say, there's a lot of reasons why halos and aero screens are there. And I think most people get that now, even if they weren't happy with their initial announcement. I can't think of any F1 channels that went bananas in a massive rant or anything about it. I've taken that video down, by the way, because it's so bad. I couldn't stand it. Albon versus Gasly. Who is better, says the Formula One News Squad. I'll annoy everyone immediately and say Gasly.
You can't just ask questions like that. Which driver's better? That's how fights start. I'd have to say Gasly. He had far more dominance in... Well, it was GP2 when he won it, wasn't it? And he's been better in the lower team.
I think it'd be closer than my head is trying to tell me it would be. I think it would be a much closer fight because I think Albon he's better than a lot of people think he is. I don't think he's this amazing superstar that some people do, but I think he is definitely much better than people think he is, and I think it would be closer, but I think Gasly overall is better. But yeah, it'd be fun. It would be a lot. I'd like to see that battle. I don't think we'll see Albon back, unfortunately, if I'm being honest.
It's funny you mentioned it. Harrison Freeland just asked if Max had to miss a race, who is in that seat, Gasly or Albon, someone else. And Josiah Boateng beat me to it because I think the official reserve driver for Red Bull is still Buemi.
Ouch. Oh, that's... surely it would be an Albon, or they bump Gasly
You
up
would
for a
think.
race, give him a shot.
You would think it would be Albon, but Buemi's the guy on the cards.
Interesting. Could be Stoffel. Hey. 360 camera on the roll hoop is great footage, says RC Ritter. Yeah, that's cool. What happened with that VR thing they were trying, by the way?
I have no idea. There's lots of things I've heard that they're going to try and they've just petered out to nothing.
Yeah.
Like someone did actually mention it in the chat earlier about the LEDs on the wheel covers. Still heard nothing. I don't know if it's been binned or they're keeping it quiet or what.
Space says, am I nothing to you? I don't know if you're referring to the Albon thing. Of course you're something to me, Space. Of course you are. You're here watching, keeping us company. So, yes, you are. Helmet Cam says, Mayank, they've got driver's eye in Formula E, which is pretty cool, but you wouldn't want to watch it for too long, I don't think. It's quite bumpy. Formula E, of course, in London this weekend, which I can't get to. So, I couldn't do Silverstone. I can't do Formula E, and I'm sulking, but there you go. Gasly replacement and messed up pit stop and puncture to only come 7th, says Tyler. Probably his luck, definitely. Do you think, actually, Jonty, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, because I spotted this earlier, and I wasn't going to, and now I've decided that I'm going to ask everybody else a question for a change, because, you know, why not? I'm stealing it from, and I saw you already answered this, Jonty, but I'll give you a chance to say it on stream as well. I'm stealing it from The Race, and I'll just tweak it slightly. It says, which now retired driver would you have loved to have seen win a world championship? We'll stick to F1. Which retired F1 driver who didn't win a championship would you love to see win a championship? You stole my answer, Jonty, but I'll let you explain yours to the stream.
All day, every day, Rubens Barrichello. Not only is he possibly the most loved F1 driver around the world there's ever been, he was genuinely equal to Schumacher on many, many occasions. You could probably argue for most of 2003 and 2004, but by that point, Mr. Schumacher's in the driving seat and will always get the call. I really wish Rubens had had one. If only just to make up for Brazil, Why does his own country's track hate him so much?
I mean, it happened loads of times, but I remember he was having a great race in '99 for Stewart. Fantastic race in '99. His car went bang, didn't it? But it happened many times at Ferrari as well. See, Rubens was my answer because I thought he was great, genuinely lovely, super quick guy, so loved, so popular in the paddock. It would have been amazing. But I've seen a couple of people say Gerhard Berger would have been a good shout as well. I think.
Yeah, he lost out a few times through injuries.
Yeah. Osama's gone with Montoya. Fill in the blank says Moss. Absolutely. Juan Pablo Montoya for Harrison as well. Fill in the blanks. I think I just read yours, but I'll read it again. Says Montoya as well as Moss. Got to be Massa for Murray. Basil was one that said Berger there. I think Berger's a fantastic shout. Max says Rubens. RC Ritter says Moss. Yeah. Weber. Vatzel says. Kubica.
Oh, yeah, Kubica could well have had a title. 2008, he could have won that title easily if BMW hadn't been throwing their toys out of the pram.
Was pretty much on his way to Ferrari as well, wasn't he, before his accident?
Yeah.
What might have been that? I mean, Kubica Alonso lineup is a hot one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would have been good.
I'd like to say, in my opinion, it's completely unofficial. It's just me, but Sterling Moss and Peter Collins both have an honorary world title, in my opinion, because the only reasons they don't have one is because they were good people. So I'd say they get an honorary one.
Peter Collins, did you say?
The man who pulled into the pits of his own volition to give Fangio his car for the 4th title.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And Moss would have been 7 points clear if he hadn't gone to the stewards and say, no, I was there, he didn't break that rule. Meaning that Hawthorne took the title.
And I've got to throw this in here, and I mean this with the greatest respect to both of them. That's kind of the prime example, isn't it, of nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
Harsh, but it's true.
Yeah, I hate to say, I mean, I'd never be in that position anyway. It's completely impossible. But if I'd have been in Moss's position, I probably wouldn't have done that.
I stick my teammate in the wall on F1 2020 and 2021. I'm not even working with a teammate. I ain't giving him a car. I know you can't. It's not an option. That'd be an option in a game. Wouldn't it be incredible? Ricardo says space. Danny Rick's got some time yet. And if that McLaren's up there, I think, could you imagine next year McLaren are the team to beat? Norris versus Ricardo for the title. That would get very nice. Very, very punchy. RC Ritter said champions are assholes. Yeah. You got to be, though, haven't you? You got to be ruthless.
Yeah, you have to. That's one of the things about sport. Maybe not specifically, being asshole character, but you've got to be ruthless. Absolutely. As much as we love him now, Seb certainly showed that when he was at Red Bull, fighting against Webber. What's the point in him just sitting there saying we've got this silly rule in the team where whoever's in front at a certain point? No, we're racing.
See, I was on his side with that. It really annoys people when I defend him on it. Like, Multi-21 Seb, he's such a bad team player. It's like, yeah, but, it's a race.
Be faster, loser.
Yeah, pick it up, basically, yeah. And it's why, and I'm not having a go at him, it's like every single stream, if I don't mention Van Dorn, I'll have a pop at Bottas. That's not what I'm doing. But it's why I don't think Valtteri Bottas will win a world championship, because I don't think he's ruthless enough. And if he was, I think he may well have been in with a shout. I don't know if we'd maybe have got to a Hamilton-Rosberg situation, but that's what he lacks, is that ruthlessness. We said it. Back to that race reaction, Jonty. Bahrain 2018. Why is he not sending that up the inside of Seb? Hamilton's doing it. Leave it. Verstappen's doing it. Ricardo's licking the stamp and sending it. Bottas is like, I'll have, maybe not. It was kind of like a very unrisky move because of all the runoffs. So that's what Bottas lacks. So it's not that I don't think he's a good driver. It's I just don't think he's got that killer instinct in there, for the want of a better term. But something I do want to say, a couple of people saying Gilles Villeneuve to our question. Great shout. Also, Heinz Harold Frenson. I agree with Frenson, but for one season, 1999. If he'd have won that in a Jordan, oh my God, that would have been incredible. Yeah. And to do it as well, Schumacher after his accident. So for Irvine, in that Ferrari doesn't win it, and then Hakkinen in that McLaren doesn't win it, and then through comes this Jordan. And he could well have done it without that retirement coming out of the pits in France. Not France, at the Nürburgring, sorry. He had a brilliant drive in France. So Heinz Harold Frenson's a great shout. Lovely guy as well. Or at least I remember him as a lovely guy when I was growing up watching him.
I wasn't paying enough attention.
Adam M. No, I've already read yours, Adam M. Sorry, it's RC Riss. It said, nice chat. Notify bell rung. Thank you very much, mate. Yes, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like as well. We're wrapping up very, very shortly. 322 likes. So we got them. We got them for you, Charles. Like I said, don't think we're going to get the 500, but that's not bad for a stream where we've got 566 watching. So I hope that's enough for you, mate. Let me know if it isn't, and we'll sort it out next Sunday, definitely. But yeah, absolutely awesome. Which GP from Moss with the penalty stuff are you guys talking about? Want to read up on it? It says Asama.
I can't remember exactly what race it was. Possibly Spa, because it was the old long track. But there was an accusation that Hawthorne had taken a different road or driven backwards on the track, I think, and was going to get disqualified for it until Moss went up to the stewards and said, no, I was driving past at that point. He did not do that.
Marcita, good question. Says, I wanted to know if the regulation that the aero time awarded will be reset after the first half of the season would have some teams sandbagging at Hungary. That's already reset. That reset at the end of June. So we're already on to the wind tunnel time and all of that business, the CFD time. That is all now calculated on the championship standings between the start of the season and the end of June, as I understand it. That's been reset. So we're kind of past that point. But I do wonder sometimes if... Do you think a team would ever do that, Jonty? I mean, competitive nature of these teams, do you think they'd ever sandbag just to have a rough weekend and lose a couple of points if they're a couple of points clear of a team behind, just so they get a bit more CFD time for next year? Do you think that's something anybody would do? Or is it these teams are just so competitive, aren't they? They want to beat everybody that they can.
It's certainly possible. I wouldn't like to call it either way.
How'd you tell a Fernando Alonso to go slow for a weekend, though?
Yeah, exactly. You just can't. I mean, we got a brilliant reminder of that. It was last year. I can't remember what race. Might have even been Austria, where Formula Dank came out with the brilliant meme because we had the radios for both Mercedes drivers saying, urgent, critical, you've got to stay off the curbs, and then every single corner, there they are. Her curbs go burr. You're just not going to do it.
They're like, sorry, engineer, didn't hear you there because I was running over the curbs. Yeah, take a couple more questions then. If you've got any, throw them into the chat. I don't want to get into it, but I'm not going to answer any questions on Sunday. I know that'll annoy a few people. I think if you want me to be honest, I don't want to talk about it. I think, obviously, the reaction from people on social media towards certain drivers, in fact, to both drivers, obviously the abuse that Lewis Hamilton suffered, and the kind of abuse I mean, was absolutely disgusting. But so were the threats to him, and so were the threats to Max Verstappen. It was just so unnecessary. And then the abuse that we got on Sunday as well. And I just think it's just not worth the headache talking about it. I stand by everything I said on Sunday. If you want to know what I said on Sunday, it's there. I've not changed my opinion having watched it all, but I think that the reaction, and I know, without falling into the it's not everybody thing, but I know it's not everybody, but I just think it was pretty pathetic, frankly. So I'm just going to do what a lot of people have done and draw a line under it, and let's see what happens in Hungary. I'll tell you what it has done, though. It has spiced up this season, no bloody end, and it was already pretty spicy. So, yeah, very, very much looking forward to Hungary. And I never look forward to Hungary, Jonty. I never do. So, apart from the fact we'll see racing, but I think it's going to be so exciting. I do. I genuinely do. I know you're not a big fan of Hungary as a track.
No, but with how tight things are this year, could certainly be very entertaining. And we've had entertaining Hungaries in the past. But you just watch turn 3.
Space says, I want to talk about the stewards, not Max or Lewis. They're drivers driving. Shit happens. Completely agree. Stewards, what do you want me to say, mate? I mean, we do this all the time. They are... I don't think they're the worst we've ever had, because we've seen some shocking decisions that have led to some much bigger accidents and some much bigger controversies, I would argue. But the stewards, they do seem a little bit... I asked Stewart, I'll tell you what, actually, Jonty, I asked Stewart on Sunday, I said, do you think that the stewards listen too much to what social media says and what the fans are saying about penalties and that? Because it almost feels like there's an outside influence, because they're not consistent at all. I don't think, and I'm not just referring to Sunday, I just mean in general, I just don't feel like they're consistent with anything.
I'll say yeah, but I think that's more from team principals rather than drivers. And I think you said they've backed themselves into a corner because they've been handing out penalties for any little tap. And then all of a sudden, when it's a genuine racing incident, they've got to give one. You know, can you imagine the outcry if they hadn't given anything on Sunday? It would have been a disaster. It would have been colossal. But then you look at the day before, Russell and Sainz. Oh. Not in a million years is that a penalty. I mean, they barely grazed each other. Russell got a penalty for that, but do you know who didn't get any kind of penalty? Carlos Sainz rejoining the track at the apex of a corner when there's a good 7 or 8 cars still to come through. What? That's insane.
I mean, they're never going to win, are they, stewards? Because they did give a penalty for Hamilton, and people were still cross. But that's kind of the point that I get on with stewards, is that they've backed themselves into a corner, like you say, Jonty, as I said on Sunday. They've backed themselves into a corner because some of the penalties they give are piss weak. They really, really are. Some of them they give are so you look at and you go, what? But then something else happens that is nothing, and they do give a penalty, and you sort of think, what? So there's no consistency there, and there needs to be a change. And I still am a fan, and I know that the drivers might not like it because it means they might feel like somebody's got an agenda against them or something. But I would prefer to see set stewards every race weekend, so we've got some consistency across the board. But the problem is, you could argue it's not the stewarding that's the problem; it's the regulations that are the problem. So, you know, I go in on the stewards all the time, but actually they have a book of regulations, if you like, to follow. And they've got to give decisions based on that. And I'll tell you something I would like to see, and I know that Nick, Cranky Yankee, has mentioned this a few times on Twitter. What I would like to see in the regulations is, what is a racing incident? We see it all the time on these decisions, no further action racing incident, but nowhere in the regulations does it explain what a racing incident is.
There is something in a regulation somewhere. I don't know if it's in the sporting regs or if it's in guidelines that the stewards have to follow. It says specifically whenever neither driver can be claimed to be predominantly at fault, which is just the definition of a racing incident for me. So I don't know why they would need regulation for it. But yeah, there is a problem with that. So at the moment, it seems like the regulation they have for these penalties is just do whatever you think. But the problem is, you've got this team of stewards that some of them, that's just what they do. And then they have the driver steward. None of these driver stewards are suitable, in my opinion.
Because they haven't driven these cars.
Exactly. The steward for this weekend was Emmanuel Pirot. When did he last drive a Formula One car? I can't remember.
Supporter and Nico Rosberg in there. Get him off Sky duty and get him in the driver room.
I mean, like, I can't remember exactly when Pirot last drove, but I'm pretty sure it was turbocharged and was in the 80s. You know, it's ridiculous. It's got to be someone with minimum last 5 years of experience. I know it narrows it down to not many people, but there's still a few around who aren't doing anything. They've got to be able to know exactly how these cars feel when they're turning a corner, when they're accelerating, when they're braking.
Can we have that? Just retract the name and just put like driver X. Adonis says it was Hamilton's fault, but not Hamilton's fault that it was Hamilton's fault. Racing incident. That should be the definition in the regulations. It was the driver's fault, but it's not the driver's fault that it was the driver's fault. So racing incident. It's so. Yeah, I don't know. But you look at things, and I know comparing season on season is silly because regulations change and that, but Norris on Perez and Perez on Leclerc in Austria were penalties. Leclerc on Hamilton in Monza in 2019 wasn't.
Yeah, when he literally pushed him off the track.
That's the inconsistency that gets me.
I mean, I don't know if Adonis Gentry was mean to be satirical or not with that, but it's a perfect description of that incident. You know, he ended up in that position because Max left the door open. That's Max's fault. He didn't shut it enough. You're going to get someone coming up the inside, but then it was Lewis's fault that he turned a bit too late and understeered. But then it's also Max's fault that he still turned in when he knew the car was there. You know, you keep going backwards and forwards between the two of them, putting little faults on them when you look at the whole thing. So it's quite clearly not one driver's fault. So by that rule, shouldn't be a penalty, but one driver's out of the race. So it's you could keep going backwards and forwards with this all day, every day for a year and still not come up with anything sensible. Usually, as long as they don't deliberately take someone out like Maldonado used to do, then it's a racing incident, you know, unless it's, you know, very, very obvious. Locking up like a lunatic on a dive bomb that'll never work, taking them out is obvious. But that wasn't the Sunday, it wasn't obvious. I think there is a point when it can be said that one is obviously at fault and another isn't.
Fill in the blanks also say on a penalty situation, neither was Leclerc on Gasly in Austria. Gasly was turning right in a straight line. Leclerc was, sorry, and hit Gasly. That wasn't a penalty, but Space, just adding to, because I mean, Space asked a question, so they're now saying that what I'm saying is that team principals have an opportunity to lobby stewards for specific interpretations. That can't, my brain is not functioning. Basically, that's not going to give you consistency. That's actually come up this week. Christian Horner, surprise, surprise, is not happy that team principals can effectively go to the stewards and lobby them during a race, and he says that needs to stop. He's obviously not going to be happy, and I think that we can take what Christian Horner and Toto will say with a pinch of salt this week, next week or so, definitely. But I agree with him there. You should not, in the same way that footballers are not supposed to crowd the referee, I don't think it's fair for team principals to be able to go running up to Michael Massey and go to try and get a bigger penalty or less of a penalty or whatever. The stewards need to make their decision based on the rules because that will help with consistency. I don't think we'll ever get consistency because no two accidents are the same. You could put Leclerc and, well, let's say Gasly through Stowe together in exactly the same move, but you're not going to have exactly the same outcome and you're not going to get exactly the same penalty. So, or you might, I don't know, but it wouldn't be, you can't look at them as two identical incidents, even though it's at the same corner and it's similar. So,
you're quite right, you couldn't because it was cops.
Well, whatever. Stowe, cops, village, farm, the A1, you know what I mean. Felid says, thank you very much for your contribution, mate. It says, do you think F1 will regret it if the car doesn't live up to the hype, or do you think all the hype is ultimately good? Will fans be mad? I think they'll take a hit, won't they? I think they will. If it doesn't work, I think it's going to maybe hurt them a little bit. But I think it's not the right attitude, actually, to be honest, for me to have Felid. But as an F1 fan for so long, I'm going to watch whatever. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask that. I think this is to sort of lean towards engaging a future audience. I'm always going to watch now. That's not going to change. I've invested way too much bloody time in this sport. For me to throw that away, but I think the hype is good, but I fear that they are in for disappointment because I still think we are going to see next season a team get those rules and nail it. I think we will see a dominant team or two and a mix-up in the grid. It's what happens after that that'll be exciting. But what do you reckon, Jonty? Do you think the hype's a good thing, or do you think that they'll regret all this because I've never seen a car launch like this before by F1.
I do think the hype's good because at the moment they've got a hell of a lot of traction across all the social media platforms, and the success of Drive to Survive. It's got people in, and now there's something big and new coming. So they've got to keep running with that hype train. But I don't think they'll regret it if it doesn't turn out to be what they're expecting, because that keeping of the DRS means people won't notice quite as much if it doesn't work as well as they intend. Do you know what I mean?
Feel it again. Thank you very much. Says Max and Hamilton incident and penalty wouldn't have been nearly as big a deal if it was midfield knocking another one out. Championship made it more dramatic. Should stewards consider standing? I say no. I agree. If that's Latifi and Ocon, nobody cares. Apart from why the hell is Ocon racing Latifi? Nobody really cares. Nobody says a word. The problem you've got, and this is the last thing I'm going to say on it, the problem you've got, and jump in if you think I'm completely wrong on this, Jonty, is you've got a tight championship fight, you've got two drivers who aren't afraid to speak their mind, and you've got two drivers who have got ludicrously, and in some ways brilliantly, and in some ways not so brilliantly, passionate fan bases, and if they come to blows, it's just going to go bang. It's just all going to blow up. The abuse, whatever it is not necessary. It's disgusting, it's stupid, I can't be bothered with it. It's so ridiculous and it's so unnecessary. But when you've got two passionate fan bases, of course it's going to kick off. Could you imagine if Senna, we're going into Fantasyland, I know, but if Imola 94 doesn't happen, could you imagine Schumacher pulling that move in Jerez on Senna? Could you imagine how much that would have blown up in the fan base? Obviously not on social media because it didn't exist, Jonty, but, people would be sending their carrier pigeons out and everything to have a go, wouldn't they? It wasn't that long ago.
And now anyone who used AOL, his instant messenger, is saying social media did exist.
Well, by the time you got online to have a massive rant on MSN Messenger, by the time you'd actually got it loaded up, you've calmed down.
But no, you're quite right. That if Imola 94 hadn't have happened and it was Schumacher and Senna that would have been in that incident at Ref, there would have been fights in the grandstands. Seriously. I really, really hope it doesn't, but I'm kind of concerned for Hamilton fans going to Zandvoort. It's that bitter at the moment, and it doesn't need it.
Yeah, Hank says valid criticism has to be allowed, even if a couple of morons try and spoil it. Can have a two-tier league. Absolutely, there is nothing wrong with criticism, Hank. I give it, I take it a lot, but there's nothing wrong with criticism. It's how you give that criticism, and that's the difference. You're absolutely spot on there, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to it all. We'll see how it all kicks off, but that's the last I'm going to be saying on that one. It's chaos. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up, Jonty. I didn't realise it was 20 to 10, mate. But I feel like I could go for another hour, quite frankly. But we are going to wrap it up. We did half the stream on the 2022 car, and then the other half just chatting to you guys in chat. So nice, really nice to be able to have just a really good chat with you all, because it's been a while. It's been a while. Byram says, I'm still pissed at you, Sean, but I'm back to join you regardless. Cracking on. Hey, again, mate, I don't know, you maybe one in the comments or from last week, but we're going to disagree. If you follow the channel, we're going to disagree. I've got strong opinions. I'm sure you have. We can fall out. We can argue. We can agree. We can disagree. But at the end of it, we're F1 fans, and I respect that, and I'm sure you can respect that as well. So nothing wrong with good debate, is there, Jonty, at all?
No, not at all. And I say right from the very start, this has been what I've enjoyed most on these streams, is when everyone gets involved. When we start going to these questions, it's always interesting because someone's always got something that makes us go, oh, God, I don't know, and shuts us up for a minute trying to think. I can't remember who it was today, but someone's managed it yet again.
So they're all in chat. They're all like, oh, I wish we could shut them up for a minute. Christ, could you imagine how good that is? I sometimes think about just making the channel a live stream channel, but I think videos would have to die a death for me to do that one. But that's a story for another day. Thank you very much, Jonty, mate. It's been a pleasure. I think we need to do a few more of these midweek streams where we just sit and chat with everyone. They're lovely. So thank
Yeah,
you. It's been
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. Midweek or non-race weekends, always good fun. So thanks for having me on. It's been great to chat to everyone again, and of course to you. But the chat's more important. Sorry.
I mean, backhanded compliment. I mean, thanks, mate. Rude. But yeah, thank you very much, mate. And I'm sure I'll talk to you shortly.
Yeah, see you later, folks.
Thank you to Jonty. Thank you to you guys in chat as well. Sorry, I say sorry it's been long. I think you seem to have all enjoyed a good conversation. Thank you as well for your likes. 368. We got over 250 for Charles, so please do drop a like before you disappear. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Plenty of content. I say plenty. There'll be something between now and the end of the week, and then there'll be the usual stuff for the race weekend. And then, of course, it's a summer break where I'll probably do my half-term reports, as I used to call them. Probably bring them back again this year just to fill the void that is August. And, of course, 2022 driver lineup predictions will also be out in the summer as well. So lots to come over the next few weeks and months. That's pretty much it. Links to social media in the description down below. As always, don't forget to give Jonty a follow as well. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.